Everyone loves to see a good game get the praise it deserves. A fun game gets good reviews, sells well, a sequel gets announced, you can't help but be excited. But then that joy turns to ash in your mouth when the game becomes so successful that it's franchised out to another developer. This can often be a death sentence. Not necessarily for the series as a whole, but very likely for the game in question. For every fantastic franchised work like Obsidian's Fallout New Vegas, the corpses of a dozen failed spin-offs litter the ground. Here are 12 great series that were given to other developers, who promptly failed to do anything worthwhile with them. Castlevania began as a side-scrolling action series on the NES back in 1986. With a whip and some holy water, the Belmont clan took on Dracula's forces of evil, and worse, like Medusa heads. Konami rebooted the series a few years back with the help of Spanish studio Mercury Steam. Castlevania Lords of Shadow was actually pretty good, but Mercury Steam's portable interquel, Mirror of Fate, wasn't. The game tried to combine the classic Metroidvania format with Lords of Shadow style, and ended up as a slow-paced, clumsy mess full of drawn-out combat and awful QTE-laden boss fights. The Final Fantasy series is usually developed internally by its creator, Square Enix, so most of the worst Final Fantasies actually aren't franchise titles, but there is one that comes to mind. For the sequel to Final Fantasy XII, Revenant Wings, developer Think and Feel dropped the ball. What they wanted to achieve was a Final Fantasy that could be played by anyone, because it was a DS game, so they added streamlined controls and easier content. But for some reason in the process, they decided to turn Final Fantasy XII into a lightweight strategy game, rather than simply adapting the game's touchscreen-friendly mechanics into a faithful sequel. Fans hated how easy the game was, not to mention its pointless plot, and the fact that it wasn't really much of a Final Fantasy. But hey, at least Vaughn wore something more like a shirt this time. After the completion of Halo 3, Bungie announced that they were splitting off from Microsoft to go indie. They did stick around to help create ODST and Reach, but afterwards 343 Industries took lead on Halo 4. Well, if Halo 4 wasn't a bad game, it wasn't the Halo fans wanted. It felt more like Call of Duty Covenant Edition. Despite its impressive visuals, the game seemed off, with multiplayer design reminiscent of Call of Duty and no real oomph to the weapons. Alas, the one thing that remained the same from previous Halos was the worst thing: the nonsensical story that required players to buy half a dozen novels and comics to make sense of anything.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
Back in the day, Nintendo signed a deal with Philips to create games for their console, the CDI, mostly despite Sony. Nintendo let Philips use some of their characters for games, but foolishly left the game design in Philips' hands as well. And that is how Link Faces of Evil came to be. Many of the games on this list are bad in context of their respective series, but Link is just a straight-up horrible game. Abysmal controls, irritating voice acting, and shoddy graphics make this an unfortunate stain on the Zelda franchise. Back in the dim and distant year of 1999, Capcom published Mega Man and Bass: Threat from the Future, aka Rockman to Forte, Mirai Kara no Chosensha, for the Japanese WonderSwan handheld, a black and white system designed by Gunpei Yokoi, who had created the Game Boy. While a decent system, it had a ton of crappy games, and Rockman and Forte was among the worst. Developed by Bandai rather than Capcom, it featured bad graphics, stupid bosses themed around household appliances of all things, and absolutely god-awful level design. A remake of PlayStation's Metal Gear Solid exclusive to Nintendo GameCube, the Twin Snakes saw Silicon Knights attempt to bring the PS1 original up to Metal Gear Solid 2's standards. Unfortunately, it turned out to be quite a mess. They didn't bother updating the game's levels to compensate for the ability to aim in first person, for example, so every fight became trivial. And the parts they did update, the cutscenes and the dialogue, felt hammier and more ridiculous than in the original version of the game.
The princess is now a permanent guest at one of my 7 Cooper hotels. I dare you to find her if you can.
Link wasn't the only character that Nintendo handed over to Philips for a CDI outing. Mario himself had one game on that awkward CD-based system, Hotel Mario. While seemingly an attempt to tap back into the classic arcade feel of early Mario games, Hotel Mario felt like a terrible bootleg. Sluggish, sloppy, unfinished, and rushed. This just might be Mario's most awful outing. For Activision's first NES release, they gave the keys to the Pitfall kingdom to Pony Inc. and infamous Japanese ghost development studio Micronix to create Super Pitfall, a wretched remake of Pitfall 2. Super Pitfall tells a classic tale, and that tale is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. In trying to add some spice and variety to Pitfall 2, Micronix made it clumsy instead, even though the original played fine, and added a lot of unneeded content, like a gun. Pitfall Harry is like Batman Micronics, he doesn't use guns. When Tomb Raider debuted in 1996, the world said, "Where's the nude code?" Later, they grew up and added, "Hey, this is what Prince of Persia would be like in 3D. So, unsurprisingly, when Red Orb Entertainment took on the task of creating a 3D Prince of Persia for PC and Dreamcast, they borrowed a lot of ideas from Lara Croft. They didn't, unfortunately, borrow good level design, good control, or anything like quality assurance. And it shows. With weak controls and abysmal voice acting, Prince of Persia 3D felt unfinished, because, well, it was never finished. In 2012, Slant 6 Games created Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City for the PS3, PC, and Xbox 360. The game had a heavy focus on multiplayer and cooperative play. Not bad ideas at all, given the direction Resident Evil 5 and 6 took the series, but this spin-off was bogged down by horrible controls and a dull atmosphere that didn't have the Resident Evil feel. The game can be fun if you play with a couple of your buddies, but it can't hold a candle to the other installments of the franchise, let alone its obvious inspiration, Left 4 Dead. Check 6 Games and Equinox teamed up to tackle America's favorite purple dragon with... no, not Barney. Spyro, Enter the Dragonfly. The game itself is actually pretty good, tightly crafted and generally fun, but there was nothing new about this sequel. Instead of recreating the unique ideas and general cleverness of Insomniac's original Spyro trilogy, they merely rehashed mechanics and content from older installments. A pointless, toothless sequel. In 1995, Chicago's Incredible Technologies adapted the Jean-Claude Van Damme vehicle Street Fighter into an arcade game. Does this footage look like Mortal Kombat to you? That's because Street Fighter the movie, the game, was a chimeric abomination combining Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and Killer Instinct. It barely plays like Street Fighter 2, the new characters are terrible and borderline offensive, and it doesn't even have Raul Julia's "For me, it was a Tuesday" speech digitized anywhere. What a waste. Strider 2 was Tiertex's sequel to Capcom's Strider, but it wasn't based on the arcade game so much as Tiertex's horrible home adaptation of the arcade game. It's a joyless, lifeless slog that captures none of the considerable appeal of the real Strider. Not only do fans universally hate this sequel, it was so bad that Capcom later developed their own Strider 2 and swept this eyesore under the rug, expunging it from the Jedi archives forever. So what did we miss? What other games turned out to be franchise failures? Let us know in the comments below. And of course, for all your gaming needs, be sure to head over to usgamer.net. We're also a franchise property, but we're cool.